The sun hung low over the jagged ridges, a dying ember sinking into the western horizon. Dust rolled across the empty stretch of prairie-like ghostly fog, softening the edges of the Harper Ranch. The place looked worn but alive, fences mended 100 times, a windmill groaning as it turned slow circles, and a tired horse standing in the corral with its head bowed low. On the porch stood Eli Harper, hat brim shadowing his face, thumb hooked in his belt. He'd been waiting for 3 hours, ever since the trail dust rose in the distance. The stagecoach approached in jerks, wheels crunching through the dry earth. He could see the driver slumped with fatigue, reins slack in his hands, and one passenger, a small figure huddled inside, head lowered. When it stopped in front of his gate, the air seemed to still. A tumbleweed skittered past, clattering softly against the fence post. "Harper Place, right," the driver called out, jumping down and stretching his stiff back. "Got your, housekeeper from the agency." Eli gave a curt nod, hands still in his pockets. "That'd be her." The driver muttered something about long roads and cold nights before swinging open the stage door. A woman stepped out slowly, clutching a faded carpetbag. She moved carefully, like she wasn't sure the ground would hold her. Her bonnet shaded most of her face, and her coat looked 2 sizes too big, frayed at the cuffs. When she finally looked up, the last of the sunset caught her eyes, not bright or polished, but soft, like weathered silver. "Mr. Harper?" she asked quietly. "That's me," he said, voice rough from disuse. "I'm Clara Bishop. The agency said you were in need of help." Her words trembled slightly, though she held her chin high. Eli studied her for a moment. He could see she wasn't used to being looked at, her shoulders drew inward as though bracing for judgment. He simply nodded toward the porch. "Reckon I do. Come inside. Supper's near ready." She hesitated at the steps. "You have a family, sir?" He shifted his weight, glancing through the window where lamplight flickered. "Just me and my boy. Luke, 12. "I see." Her voice softened. "Then I'll do my best to keep things running proper." They stepped into the house together. The scent of stew hung in the air, mingled with the dry, woody smell of the fire. Clara set her carpetbag down near the door, glancing around. The place was clean but bare, every surface showing the hand of a man who worked too hard and cared too little about comfort. Eli pulled out a chair for her. "You can rest a spell before you start in. You came a long way." She nodded, fingers twisting in her lap. "I didn't think you'd keep me, once you saw." He frowned. "Saw what?" She hesitated. Then, with a quiet breath, she lifted her bonnet and set it aside. Her hair was a dull chestnut color, tied back in a simple knot. Her cheeks were pale, one marked faintly with an old bruise that hadn't quite healed. She didn't look him in the eye when she spoke. "I know I'm not what most folks expect. I'm not pretty." The words came out raw, the kind of confession that had lived too long inside. The fire popped, breaking the silence, and still Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked, at the small scars along her hands, the worry lines etched deep despite her youth, the way she sat with both feet tucked close as if ready to run. "That's fine," he said finally. His tone wasn't dismissive, just plain and steady. Clara blinked, startled. "Fine, yep." He leaned back, voice low. "I'm not looking for fancy. Just honest." Something in her face shifted, confusion first, then a faint glimmer of relief. She exhaled, shoulders sinking as if a weight she'd carried for years had just fallen away. "I can do honest," she murmured. "Then we'll get along fine." He rose, showing her to a small room just off the kitchen. "Ain't much, but it's warm. You'll find a wash basin, extra blanket in the chest, and you can help yourself to coffee come morning." She ran her fingers along the wooden windowsill, eyes catching the last pink hue of sunset fading outside. "It's more than I hoped for," she whispered. When Eli stepped back into the kitchen, his son Luke was sitting by the hearth, staring curiously. "She's small," he said. Eli grunted. "Smaller than you think, maybe stronger than she looks." "She gonna stay?" the boy asked. "Reckon that's up to her." They ate supper quietly, with Clara seated across from them. She barely touched her food, still nervous, but her gaze softened every time Luke spoke, the way he told stories about his school, the old dog that followed him everywhere, the way he tried to act older than he was. When the plates were cleared, Clara rose and began to wash them without being asked. Eli wanted to tell her she didn't have to, but the way her hands moved, steady and practiced, made him stay silent. She looked like someone who needed to be useful, who found peace in small, ordinary things. Afterward, She stood near the firelight, drying her hands on her apron. The flames caught in her eyes, giving them warmth he hadn't noticed before. "It's been a long time since anyone needed me," she said softly. Eli looked up from his chair. "Maybe we both needed somebody," he replied. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled. The old clock ticked slow. She smiled then, small and uncertain, but real. "Good night, Mr. Harper." The days passed slower after Clara came. Mornings began earlier. Long before the sun crested the ridge, she was already up, kindling the fire and setting water to boil. Eli would come in from the barn to find the table neat, the smell of coffee in the air, and his son Luke already dressed and grinning over a plate of biscuits. It wasn't just that she worked hard, it was that the ranch finally felt alive again, like the walls themselves had stopped holding their breath. At first, Eli spoke little to her. He wasn't a man of many words, and she seemed grateful for that silence. They worked around each other easily, him fixing fences or tending cattle, her mending clothes and sweeping the porch. Sometimes their paths crossed in the barn, and she'd pause long enough to hand him a hammer or offer a quiet, "You missed a spot." He'd grunt, pretending not to smile, and she'd turn away before he caught the flicker of warmth in her eyes. Luke adored her. He'd follow her through the house asking questions, chattering about school and horses, about how his mother used to make molasses bread in winter. Clara listened, always patient, and sometimes her hands would tremble just slightly when he mentioned the woman who came before her. But she never shied away. She'd just smooth the boy's hair and say softly, "You're lucky. You had a mama who loved you true." One morning, as Eli was hauling hay, he noticed Clara standing by the paddock, her hair loose for the first time. The wind caught the brown strands, lifting them like silk ribbons. She was feeding one of the mares, murmuring something soft, her voice almost musical against the wind. He stopped in his tracks without meaning to. There was a steadiness about her now that hadn't been there before, a quiet confidence born from being treated kindly. When she turned and saw him watching, she flushed. "Didn't mean to wander off, Mr. Harper. I just like the quiet out here." He wiped his hands on his shirt. "Ain't no harm in that. The quiet's what keeps a body sane." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, then dropped to the dirt. "I never knew quiet could be gentle. Where I came from, it always meant something bad was comin'." Eli's chest tightened. He didn't ask what she meant, though he could guess. Life out here had a way of collecting broken souls, people running from fists, hunger, or the kind of cruelty that never needed a reason. That night, a storm rolled in, wild and sudden. The wind screamed through the trees, rattling shutters and shaking the roof. Luke was asleep by the fire when the thunder hit, and Clara, startled, dropped the iron pot she'd been drying. It clattered loud against the floor, and she froze, eyes wide. "Hey." Eli crossed the room slowly, his voice low. "It's just the storm. Nothing to fear." She tried to speak, but the words tangled. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Clara." The way he said her name stopped her. He crouched to pick up the pot, setting it aside gently. "You don't have to be sorry for being scared." She stood there, pale and shaking, until he laid a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't much, just a steady weight, warm through the fabric, but it grounded her. Slowly, her breathing eased. "I used to be hit for spillin' things," she whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. Eli felt something inside him twist. "Ain't nobody gonna raise a hand to you here," he said quietly. "Not me, not anyone." She nodded once, still trembling, but this time when the thunder rolled, she didn't flinch. He waited until she sat, then stirred the fire higher, filling the room with warmth and light. Later, after the storm eased, she stood by the window, looking out at the rain. Her voice came soft. "You don't talk much, Mr. Harper." He gave a half smile. "Don't got much to say that's worth hearin'." "I think you do." The simplicity of it hit him harder than he expected. For years he'd been a man of few words because words hadn't fixed anything, not the sickness that took his wife, not the loneliness afterward. But Clara said it like truth, not flattery. And something in him wanted to believe her. The next morning dawned clear, the air washed clean. Eli found her on the porch, hair damp from washing, her sleeves rolled as she scrubbed the rail. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Morning, Mr. Harper." He nodded. "Call me Eli." She hesitated. "Feels improper." "Then improper suits me fine." She laughed, a soft, surprised sound that made Luke poke his head out the door, grinning at the rare sight of his father smiling back. Over the next few weeks, Something unspoken grew between them. It was there in the way she poured his coffee first thing every morning, and the way he fixed the window in her room without being asked. It was in the comfortable silences over supper, in the way their hands sometimes brushed when passing a dish, in how Luke began to hum again while feeding the chickens. One evening, near sunset, Eli found her out by the barn mending a saddle strap. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You work harder than anyone I've ever seen," he said. She didn't look up. "Work keeps me from thinking too much." He stepped closer. "What happens when you stop?" Her hands stilled. She looked at him then, really looked, and for a long heartbeat, they simply held each other's gaze. "I start remembering things I'd rather forget," she said finally. Eli nodded, his voice quiet. "Then maybe it's time you start remembering new ones." Her eyes softened. She closed the saddlebag and rose slowly, dusting her skirt. "And what kind of memories would those be, Mr. Harper?"